If you are a descendant of Abraham, you are blessed. Never forget that. You are blessed, and you are blessed beyond measure. Because it is Revelation Talk Monday, we have to shoot this nugget, and we have to shoot revelation after revelation, so that we fulfill the title of this session, Revelation Talk. I love the book of Mark, and my anchor is going to be on the entire chapter of Mark, chapter number 4. But allow me to start off from a brief description of what is known as adrenaline. As this is something that was placed in us by our Creator, and some of you know it as the fight or flight, but adrenaline is responsible for that. Fight or flight means there's an element of induced fear that comes, and anyone is faced with that decision whether they should fight or they should flee. Stay with me, I'm going somewhere with this. Now in Mark chapter number 4 verse 14, the word says, the sower sows the word. The sower sows the word. Nothing more, nothing less, but just a word. Going down with this chapter number 4, we see from the beginning that Christ was teaching. And not only was he teaching, but he was teaching to a great multitude. And because the numbers were growing larger and larger, Christ then had to move into the sea. So he went onto a boat which was in the sea, so that he could then address the multitude which he was teaching. So he began his teaching by the side of the sea, but as he was going with his teaching, he had to move. He had to change his location to go into the sea, and now as he was teaching, the multitude was now facing the sea. I'm speaking to someone right now who is saying, I need guidance. I need an understanding of what my situation is all about, because things are just not making sense. Hear this, child of God. Christ had to sit on that boat which was in the sea, because the boat represents movement. The boat represents a tool. The boat represents a vessel which is used to navigate a water body, and in this case, it was the sea. So Christ sat in that vessel to tell you that as long as you invite him into your situation, he will stabilize it. And anything that seems like an insurmountable mountain, anything that seems like it's an endless sea, there's no hope that you see in the horizon, as long as Christ is in that situation, as long as Christ is sitting on that situation, as long as Christ is sitting in that situation, that is all you need. Yes, you may need money. Yes, you may need your friend. Yes, you may need your spouse. Yes, you may think you need all the other things that people are using to circumvent their situations. But child of God, what you need is Christ to be on and in your situation, because only he will teach you, only he will guide you out of the terrain that no one else can guide you out of. The ending part of this verse is one that is so interesting, because the chapter verse 41 and 41 of Matthew 4 of Mark 4 then tells us that after the storm came, and if you read that chapter very well, I don't have time to go through it, go and read it in your spare time. You read it very well. When Christ was on that boat after he had finished his teaching, a great storm came. And when that storm came, his disciples began to cry, Master, do you not care that we are about to perish? And as they were on that same sea, which was now being ravished by wind, there were also small little boats that were following the boat that Christ was in. So this is not the only boat that was faced with this situation of the tumultuous sea and the raging wind that was actually there. But when Christ came and then he spoke and he said, "Peace, be still," he spoke to the sea, which means the calm that came to the ship or to the vessel that Christ was in also came to the vessels, the little vessels that were following the vessel that Christ was in. Can you imagine if this bigger vessel that Christ was in, the people in there were crying because they were about to perish because of the raging sea and the wind that was there? What do you think was happening to the smaller vessels that were actually there? I am sure there must have been a very loud cry, which was probably now turning to be louder than the wind itself, because those people that were in those little vessels were the ones who were having much of that tumultuous sea hitting their little boats. But when Christ spoke for the peace to be still, it even went to those small little boats because they were on that same sea. Child of God, no matter what surrounds your situation, when it is Christ who is in your situation, that is all that matters. So anything and everything that has been destined by Christ in your life, your main boat and all the other vessels that are coming, they will come together for your good, and your situation will not only move right where you are, but even your surroundings. People will begin to speak of the greatness that Christ is bringing via you, because when Christ speaks, because he is the sower, he is the one who gives the word. When he speaks, everything and anything that is in the surrounding is also affected. So after the sea was calmed, and in verse 41, Christ then said, "You are fearful. So great is your fear. Why have you no faith?" Now the thing that intrigued me the most was that Christ didn't say, "Why do you have fear?" but he said, "You have so much fear." So much fear meaning there may be presence of fear, but the issue is, what do you do in the presence of fear? So it's not an absence of fear, but it is what you do in the presence of that fear. Now I started off with the understanding or the description to give you an understanding of where fear actually comes from. But fear in this instance is governed by your cognitive ability. It is governed by your experiences. It is governed by what you go through each and every day. That's why the word tells us that we grow from faith to faith, and so your faith level has to be growing. How does your faith level grow? It grows as you circumvent situations that are bringing a fearful nature into your system, a fearful nature into your spirit. So it is not the absence of fear, but it is what you do in the presence of that fear. And the more you learn to put Christ in your situation, the more that Christ is going to navigate you through the raging sea, and any and every situation that seems like a raging sea, he is going to speak into it, and peace is bound to prevail in that situation. So Christ here was saying, you need to have faith, because when faith is present, it circumvents, or it comes and it speaks against any level, any amount of fear, and Christ comes on top of that situation. Again, what intrigued me following that verse is verse 41, which then says, after Christ says, "Why are you so fearful? Have you not faith?" It then tells us that they were exceedingly fearful. So soon after Christ told them not to be fearful, they went on to be exceedingly fearful. Which means the enemy, child of God, does not stop speaking in a situation where he knows that Christ is in that situation. And the more that you realize that Christ is for you, the enemy wants to speak the more. And as I said in this chapter, the whole of chapter 4 is very rich because it gives us the analogy of what the sower does. And when the seed is actually sown, the part that I love the most, which I want to use as we go deeper with the revelation of this topic, time for movement, is that some of the seed falls on stony ground. There's a bit of earth on that ground, but the majority of it is stone. When the seed falls on such a ground, it sprouts up very quickly. So don't be moved, child of God, by the people that seem to be an overnight success. Do not worry. Stay strong. Make sure you are building the ground that Christ wants you to build. Because those sprout out quickly, but they lack the depth of the earth, which means they lack the depth of the word that Christ wants them to be grounded on. And so they sprout up quickly. But when they sprout up quickly, when the sun comes out, they are quickly scorched. So when the sea begins to rage, when the heat becomes too much for someone to bear, the question now becomes, on which ground are you standing on? Which word are you standing on? Has Christ sown a seed in your life? Has Christ sown a seed in your situation? What has he spoken into? Because when you are holding on to that word and you have the depth that Christ wants you to have, no matter how hot your situation becomes, no matter how much wind your situation is faced with, the word that Christ has spoken should be the anchor on which you hold on to. Because when you hold on to that, and your ground is good ground, which means you are holding on to that word in faith and you are not moved by anything that happens around you, you will be the seed that will grow and will grow in 30s, in 60s, and 100-fold, because you are on good ground, unlike the ground that is mixed with stone or that is dominated by stone. So your time has come, the time for you to move, because Christ right now is sitting on that vessel. He is sitting in that vessel that is taking you to your next level. But the enemy seems to be speaking louder than what God spoke, because you are not allowing yourself to just focus on the word that Christ spoke. Grace Center, we are moving in on the 17th of December. You shall be officially opened. The word was spoken, but everything that is happening around it has to be taken in faith, and we move and we know that Christ has already spoken that peace be still. Christ has already given you that word that you will have the great health that he wants you to have. You will have the great wealth that he wants you to have. You will have that great success in those relationships that he wants you to have. But are you going to hold on to it in faith? Because the time is now for your situation to move. Because it is the time for your situation to move. The enemy is also speaking louder because he wants to come and take you back and to take that movement in the reverse direction of where Christ wants to take it to. So when the words are seemingly stronger than what Christ has spoken, when the situation is seemingly moving against you, is seemingly more negative than the positive that you see, go on your knees, pray and say, Christ, strengthen me, because I know a word has been spoken over my life and over this situation, and I know my time to move has come. Child of God, tonight, wherever you are watching me from, this afternoon, wherever you are watching me from, your time to move has come. It is the time of movement. Get that vessel which Christ spoke for. Get that vessel, get into that vessel, and allow Christ to be in that vessel. Because no matter the storm that is going to come, nothing is going to speak against this word, because the time has been set and the time is now. Before I came for this telecast, I was listening to a song that was sang by Spirit Praise, and it says, Pandatsika Ndatora, where I have stepped on, where my foot has just stepped on that ground, I have taken. I'm speaking to someone who is taking their ground now, because Christ has spoken that it is time, and it is time for you to move. No more delays, no more stagnation. In the mighty name of Jesus, I decree and I declare, the enemy shall not be louder than the word that Christ has spoken. So regardless of whatever the enemy is throwing at you, regardless of any arrows that the enemy is trying to pull through into your body, I am speaking under the unction. It is time to move, and nothing is going to move against this vessel that Christ has set in motion. Anything and everything right now is taking shape. Anything and everything right now that Christ has put as a seed via his word is starting to move right now, and the time is now. Yesterday was not the time. 5 years ago was not the time. The time is now. The time is today. Grab this word with the tenacity that you need to grab it with, and you don't listen to anything. You don't listen to any situation that the enemy is throwing contrary to this word, because your time has come. Christ has sown that seed, and so when Christ has sown, it will germinate. Focus on the ground. Pray, receive what Christ has done for you this afternoon, this evening, depending on the time zone that you are watching me from. And because you are a descendant of Abraham, where God is saying go, you have to go. He will take care of the circumstances and the consequences. All you have to do is speak positive, pray positive, and just say, God, I am receiving this and I am moving. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.